Now, a commonplace book is a relatively new idea to us in modern times, but it's actually a really old concept. It's basically a book where the person keeps their knowledge that they are learning from books they're reading, classes they're taking, whatever it is they're doing. There's some really famous ones, Isaac Newton, for example, and some of these have been published. Virginia Woolf's notebooks have been published, and a woman named Mrs. Anna Anderson. I have also heard stories of commonplace books being so important that they were listed as part of people's inheritance. I tend to use mine a little bit differently because I'm often thinking about what I'm learning, so I tend to call mine a commonplace journal. It's a mixture of things that I've learned, things that I've read, if I'm watching documentaries, workshops, if I've learned something from some of my courses at school that I really want to remember, all of it goes in here. And combining that with a little bit of artwork has been just a really nice way for me to have a place where I know all the things I'm learning are in one place and I can always go back to it. I keep a wide variety of things in here. I keep bits and pieces about plants when I learn about plants. I keep recipes in here when I come across great recipes. Sometimes I cut them out and put them in here from magazines. And in that way, I think I'm probably using my commonplace book a little bit more like what women in the 1800s into the 1900s called a scrapbook. And I just really enjoy using this book. I've got lots of different things in here over the last few months. Sometimes I just like going back to look at it, and I'm hoping that I'm going to inspire some of you today to start making a commonplace book of your own. This summer, I've been doing quite a bit of nonfiction reading with a little bit of focus on Indigenous stories. One of them is a book called Theory of Water, and it really is a beautiful book. I have spent so much time with this book, and I've taken several pages of notes in my commonplace journal. As you can see, I've kind of kept to the theme of water. I've got quotes in here, little bits of ephemera that reminds me of water, and I've kept the color scheme kind of in the blue zone. So I think this is going to be a really nice way for me to take notes about books that I'm reading and be able to go back and find them in the future and remember all the things that I learned from the book. The approach I usually like to take with these pages is I'll do some writing about whatever I've read that I want to remember, and I leave a little bit of space on the pages so that I could come back later and do some artwork. So I thought I would work on a spread with you today, just a couple of pages about some sections in this book that I've read that really resonated with me. I've picked up a few little bits and pieces of things that I think go with the theme. And basically, the page I'm going to work on with you today is about paying tribute to the animals of the waters here in Ontario, Canada, where I live, some of which are no longer with us, some of which have declined greatly over the years of industrialization and overfishing. And I think I just wanted to kind of capture some of what I learned about these few water animals in my commonplace book so that I'll have it to go back and reflect on again in the future. In chapter 12 of the book, the writer shares knowledge that she learned from an Indigenous elder about the history and existence of eels in the Ontario waterways. I was really quite surprised to hear about this. I think maybe I have seen eels when I was a child, but I don't remember seeing them for a very, very long time. So the first thing I will do in my book is write some lines about what I've learned about eels from the book. And there's also a quote here that I want to include on my page. So the Great Lakes water system here in Ontario was once full of eels. They migrated from the Atlantic Ocean through the St. Lawrence River into Lake Ontario and into the many lakes and rivers of the province. this really blew me away because, as I said, I don't remember ever seeing eels, and I had no idea that they had this large of a population. The eels were a really important source of food for the original people of these lands. They were a source of food for predator animals, for water birds, and so on. And they played a really central role in the health and well-being of the water system. Unfortunately, over time, through industrialization and the draining of waterways for creating dams on the water system to support increased commercial fishing, and a number of important bodies of water were either drained to make way for settlers and farmland, or they were dammed to increase industrialization. There was a quote in this chapter that really jumped out for me, so I wanted to document that in my book. The quote that I wrote down is that the eel comes into our homeland. So now that I've got a quote and a nice paragraph on my page, I want to use this space to do just a little bit of a collage to bring some visual interest to the page, because for me personally, that almost guarantees that I'm going to go back and look at it later. Now, I know that I printed out a sticker. Oh, there it is. I'm an affiliate for a site called Century Library. Century Library is a online storehouse of hundreds, if not thousands, of real vintage graphics that come from real, genuine vintage books. You can get a really inexpensive monthly membership, and I find it so helpful for doing all types of journaling because I can just go on and search for what I'm looking for. How often are you going to come across a nice image of eels? Well, I found this on Century Library. I like making little sort of collage vignettes on parts of my pages just to do like a little bit of design work on them. I'm just layering a few things here that kind of go together, and I think it fits with the colors that we're seeing on the eel. And I think that's probably enough. So I'm going to go ahead and start gluing that down. I'm just going to make sure that I've written the chapter so that I can go back and look for this later. And then my quote comes from page 88. I probably have a lot more to say about eels, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that page blank, and then I'll just move on to a different page on a different topic so that you could see me work on a second page. So parts of this book really appeal to me on a personal level because there is some discussion on the Kawartha Lakes region here in Ontario. The Kawartha Lakes is where our second home is located. We have a lake house where we live half-time. And the thing is, when we bought it, I actually had no idea that this was a man-made water system and that our lake house is located on the biggest lake in the system, and that the original waterways and indigenous lands were either drained or flooded in the process of creating what it is now the Trent Severn waterway. So the waterway was built to allow the passage of large boats for fishing, for commercial trade and tourism, and in the process, much of the wetlands have been destroyed, impacting all of the water creatures, plants, and the original people of the region. So it's not lost on me that I was reading parts of this book sitting by this very lake. So that's what I'm writing about here, and I think this is a good example of how keeping a commonplace book differs a little bit for me, because this isn't really external knowledge. This is more me reflecting on what I've learning on a more personal level. So that feels a little bit more like journaling to me, and that's why I pretty much call my book a commonplace journal. So after I put my thoughts down about that, again, using the same process as I did on the other page, then I start doing a little bit of decorating the page just to make it visually interesting. That's a piece of faux washi tape that I created sort of by accident. It's a scanned and printed piece of paper with a lot of handwriting on it, and then I accidentally splashed it with watercolor paint on my desk. So there you go. It seemed fitting to me to add this Canadian postage stamp because it depicts water and then also represents colonialism. So all of this reading and the bit of artwork that I did really got me into thinking about, like, what are the creatures that are left? What are the animals and the beings that are still with us, and how can we support them? We actually have quite a bit of wildlife in our region. We have just a ton of water birds that live on our lake, and we are always so happy to see them. We have heron, we have osprey, we have ducks, we have a large family of trumpeter swans who winter on our lake. We're just so happy they're there, and in doing this learning, I'm going to be looking into ways that we could better support them and how we can tread softly on the land that we're using at our lake house. The author also writes a chapter on bullfrogs and the presence of bullfrogs in the region. We do have bullfrogs, and we do hear them. It is a wonderful song. The bullfrog is equipped with one of the loudest songs that they can make to reach their mates over the miles, and we just love hearing them. I gather from the book and the indigenous knowledge that we have far fewer of the bullfrogs in our region than we used to. And there's my second page in my Commonplace book. Thank you so much for watching and sticking with me while I talked through some of my learnings from the book Theory of Water, and also sharing your time with me while I brought some meaning to the writings that I'm keeping in my Commonplace book. Most of all, I hope you got inspired to journal your world and to think about creating a Commonplace book for yourself. And if you do, I really would love to hear about it, so do share in the comments. There really aren't any rules to this. This is about keeping the things that you've learned that you want to remember, and as with all art, you can do it your way. Thanks for watching. Take good care now.